the notion of predictions, trying to analyze what happened, guess what will happen in the future, whether that be looking at things that have happened previously and saying, will they happen again, or looking for something that hasn't yet ever happened and try to guess whether it will, despite the fact in the past something totally counter, diametrically opposed may in fact have been the case. That's a really interesting area. How do we analyze? How do we predict? Is it prescience? Is there some kind of analytic study we can go into? That in itself is a great topic to go into. But I want to address kind of a trend within that stems through into all esports games, whether it's League of Legends, Counter-Strike, StarCraft 2, whatever it may be, which is this notion, and it might sound extreme, which is the guy who just says, I called it. And the idea is he called whatever it was, like this crazy result. Sometimes people amazingly will even say it about a very obvious result. Like a team that's won the last 4 events wins the next event and they're like, I called it. And then they think like they deserve some sort of amazing credit for that. But it's usually used when it's a more unlikely one, like an upset win of an underdog team, and they're a fan of that team, and they were like, "Oh, watch out, it might upset you," and then they do, and they're like, "I called it," or like it's a close game and no one knows which way it'll go, but they said it'd be 2-1 to this person, and it was overall. The problem with this whole aspect is that a lot of those people aren't actually people who are using that concept in a reasonable manner. As in, the implication of saying I called it like that is nearly always that they want credit for knowing what would happen and for being right. Those are the two things. They want the credit. The suggestion is that they want credit for knowing what would happen and for being right. And there's a key word, right, because there's a lot of emphasis placed on that, like, because this happened, I was right. I was absolutely right. Now, the problem with that in general is that just saying, first and foremost, if you just say I called it, as in before the game you said, Ninjas in Pajamas will win this CSGO match, TSM will win this League of Legends match. If they then win that match and you then say I called it, and that's all you did was say that, and then you call that, you haven't really done anything really worthy of credit at that point in time, actually. You just said the name of a team that would win a match, and that team did win a match. Now, there's no connection there between the two. You didn't make them win the match. We haven't seen any reason as to why they would win the match. We haven't seen anything about the game aside from the fact that of the two teams playing, you said the name of the one that won. Now, let me put it this way. Here's an analogy for you. Let's say I decided, for some weird reason, we're going to make a bet, me and my friend, on where there'll next be like a hurricane or an earthquake or some natural disaster, okay? Any natural disaster. And so what we do is we put up this big map on the wall. And I'm trying to look around the map like, I think over here there's like a fault line, and I think hurricanes usually flow into this area from this like Gulf Stream, and then I've heard that this area over here there's like earthquakes like LA, like they normally get like a certain Richter scale, like 7 point or whatever, and I'm trying to like figure it all out like that. And my friend, as I'm doing all this, I'm trying to like narrow it down, like, okay, I think I'm gonna guess to San Andreas fault line. I'm gonna go for that as the next place. And my friend just covers his eyes like this, and he takes a dart and he throws it, and then it goes onto like some place in South Africa, let's say. And then a week later, there's a hurricane in South Africa. Now, if my friend then goes, called it, then I'd maybe go, well, that's a funny coincidence. But I wouldn't be like, wow, you must know a lot about like the Earth's dynamics and the plate tectonics and what's going on. Because like, how did you know that that's what would happen, man? Like, yeah, wow, you're amazing. And you know what? If you tell me the next thing that's going to happen, I'm sure it must be true because you got it right there. No, he just threw a dart at a map. As far as we can tell, there's nothing behind it. He just threw it. There's a random element. He didn't even use any analytical functioning. And in fact, my analytical functioning for trying to narrow it down might have made more sense than his did, because there's just a dart being thrown at the board. You don't get any credit for that. The reason why I make that as the extreme example is because what really is the person who just said it like that, just said TSM will win this game, when they then say I called it and then they want credit and they're like, you can say list all the reasons you want and all your analysis after the game, you were wrong and I called it. What do they really exactly want credit for then? Because they clearly don't want credit for amazing analysis. They never gave any. They don't want credit, as far as we can tell, for causing it to happen. I'm assuming they're not delusional enough to think that they, like the fucking secret, like they made the game be won because they had like a fucking hopes and dreams aspiration board with like TSM. They put a little crown on Darius's head like, that'll happen because I believe in it. Feelings. I'm sure that's not what they're suggesting. But, and this might sound like a joke, I really get the sense that some of them, the way they present it, when they're like, I called it, listen, what can I tell you? I was right. I knew I'd be right. I was right. There's a part of me which kind of feels like they have to break it down further and go beyond that and think, wait a minute, am I actually suggesting that I have psychic powers? Because as far as I can tell, if you're not giving reasons and that's not what it's based off, you're essentially suggesting you have psychic powers. Like, that's what you're saying. Oh, I had a gut feeling about it. Well, what was your gut telling you? Was your gut telling you they'd win this way or that way? No, just a gut fit. Oh, so you're psychic powers then. You believe in superstition. You believe in old wives' tales. And is that the case? I'm guessing a lot of these people would not be like, yep, I'm just a fucking old moron who believes in psychic powers. And I think I probably tapped into the etheric field of the earth and knew that TSM would win because God told me to. And that's it. That's all the transmission was. TSM will win. I was like, why, Lord? Why will they win? He's like, I'm sorry, I'm busy now. Just say that TSM will win. Good lad. Because obviously we all know God wants TSM to win. But I'm guessing people wouldn't say that they actually had psychic powers to do that. That's a ridiculous suggestion, right? And what's funny is, this will sound abstract, but actually the area of divination, which divination, by the way, is like another term for using psychic abilities to predict the future in terms of trying to figure out what's going to happen in the future. That's an interesting misnomer, though, okay? Is that people think divination is about trying to predict the future, as in read what will happen in the future. Like this example here, like that guy read the future somehow, knew TSM would win the game or Nip would win the game. They think that's what divination is. You're supposed to just be looking and you're then going to know what happens in the future. Actually, what's interesting, even the field of divination, if you look into it further, is not about that. Actually, in general, the history of divination, when you go back in history and look at what's been going on, the psychological processes, is it's about formulating a model of the universe. And the universe exists as it is, and it's massive and vast, and there's all these different complex forces. So what you do is you form your own small model, a little microcosm of the universe. And you have these little symbols within it, and the symbols will represent aspects of the universe, like physical things. Other symbols will represent forces that are at work. And the interaction between these forces and between these aspects and how they interconnect to each other and what they mean in reference directly to another thing, and then the qualities, that secondary qualities that come off that, which might refer to something else. The positioning of these things and the reference points then allows you to try and think, since this is a microcosm of the universe itself, okay, well, if these aspects interact in this way and this thing is suggested from this kind of drawing of them, then would that happen in the bigger world, in the macrocosm, in what this model is representing? Would that thing happen there the same way? And the idea is, if you've got enough skill at doing it, then it would in that sense. But that's what's interesting, is that actually it's not something that's why it's not a magical tool that reads the future, because then a total novice could just come and throw the I Ching sticks or coins you can do it with, or read the tarot or something, and they'd be able to just read the future. But you know why they can't? Because there's skill involved in it. You know why there's a skill? Because what you're doing is building up your understanding and how to interpret and analyze these symbols in a way that's, the information is coming from you. It's not coming externally. You're not reading the universe to see what will happen. You're reading your own internal processes deep down. You want to use a Freudian kind of terminology, on the subconscious level. You're trying to access that through the power of symbols, since language itself isn't how you're going to communicate with your subconscious. You're going to go down to that level and you're going to try and figure out, what does that sort of supercomputer under the surface think of these things? What does it get a sense is going to happen? How does it process things that happened before and what will happen next? And so actually the process of real divination is entirely subjective to the person themselves, entirely personal as a result, and it's less about the universe as an actual physical thing outside of the person and acts outside of the person than their own perception of those acts and the interactions and the forces and all the rest of it, their own perception of how those things will work, and trying to read as deeply and as honestly as they can into themselves. Now, you might think, what an abstract concept that is. What has that got to do with, I called it in fucking esports predictions? Because here's the thing. That whole process I described there, which is really subjective, it's more about what you think and conclusions you've come to, what's inside of you and how you interpret it and how you see things go in your perception of the world. That's what actual analysis in esports is like. Esports isn't some perfect science where you're looking at these two factors and you're saying, right, there'll be an interaction, I know exactly that this will happen here. It's more like, what is your underlying philosophy? What does your experience tell you? When these things happen in previous scenarios and you model them down here with this player, this type of a player battles that type of a player, and I've seen him play these matches before, and in this sort of situation I know that he has a tendency to go that way. You're giving your own subjective perception of the world? How do you see it happening? And that's what's interesting, is the really interesting part. In fact, the only part of any value or with any vital importance within predictions is that part, is the reasons you give and the explanation of how you come to those conclusions, and if you can, hinting at some sort of philosophy. So for example, I think that certain sort of defensive teams in this way have to play a little bit more perfectly because they're playing reactively, whereas people who are proactive, yes, they can gamble and lose, but they also have an aggression. They force people. The surprise factor is there. This is a general philosophy that I'm describing now. So now you would see when I see certain matchups, that's why certain teams I would actually favour, even though I think they're better. Sometimes it'll even the matchup up because they have to play a little bit more perfectly than the other does. The other can be a bit more loose, a bit more roughshod, a bit more sloppy, and they can win. Now, the reason why I bring this up is because that's what analysis is about. And then that's going to feed into the concept of whether you called it and whether you were right. Remember that phrase? It has to be that you were right. It's not just that you called it, it's that I was right. Somehow I just knew that would happen. Did you really? Because if you did know, why not just give us some reasons why? In fact, if you have a really deep sense for this, a really strong sense that this is going to happen, and you kind of have you're not someone who's just blindly throwing the dart at them up, then go ahead, give us as much reasoning as you can. Make it really in depth. And then if you are correct, if you're correct both on the outcome and the reasoning, people can go to the reason, wow, he was right. Oh, what was his reason? And then they'll read it and they'll go, wow, that's really interesting. You're really astute there. Now I can see, hey, maybe you've taught me something. Maybe going forwards, this will help. Because an important point to make, and this might sound like something that's just to apologize for all the analysts out there, but it's not in any sense. It's absolutely true. The reasons as to why you say something will happen are more important than the outcome, as in the actual result. As in, if I said to you, right, in this particular match, Envy will beat Fnatic. Now, if that's all I say, and then Envy beats Fnatic, I get less points than someone else who said, when Fnatic plays Envy, I think Fnatic will win, but Fnatic will play in this way. On Mirage, they'll have this very interesting CT setup with the Rotator Crims playing in this way, and I think if he can get enough kills here, that'll hold off Envy and they'll be able to take Mirage. And then going over to Dust 2, I think actually Envy can win that map. I think the way it plays out, their T-side can be better sometimes. If he'd said all that stuff, okay, and then in the end result, the same result's going to happen, which is that Envy wins the series. But when we watch it play out, Mirage plays out just like he said, Dust 2 plays out just like he said, and then on the last map, he gives a reason, which actually is the way the game plays out, but a couple of rounds, there's like some amazing headshots by Envy, there's like a really sick 1v1 by Shocks, and Envy ends up winning the match. Now, who of these two people is right? Now, yes, on the result, just saying the name of the person who won, the guy who said Envy is correct. But actually, the guy who gets more credit in that scenario would be the guy who described not only his own reasons as to why, but had gone in depth enough that then when we saw things play out and we saw that some of the kind of principles that he explained did occur, and those were the way the interactions happened, there's much more value in what he said. So in that sense, using phrases like right and wrong don't really work in that way. Because if we say, oh, well, he was right, the guy who just said the name, oh, and he was wrong, it's so black and white. Like, everything was right here and everything... No, it doesn't work that way. The reasons outweigh just the outcome alone. And more importantly, as I've described before with the divination example, they tell you about the person who's doing this. Like when you see that, you can sort of see the way he perceives the game there. And you can see that, oh, that's interesting, because I saw the way actually this player that he thought, he characterized this player maybe as a choker and he didn't do that. So then in the game, if that guy does slightly better and has a heroic round, now you can ask yourself something interesting. You can go, okay, was he wrong in mischaracterizing him that way? Was he correct and this was an unusual get? You see, there's value at all points in this, even if the guy is actually wrong in terms of what happens. As in, even his reasons turn out to be wrong. There's value in the way it was presented there, in a way that just saying that happened, there's no value to that. You don't get any points for correct outcome but wrong reasons. There's an important point to make. That's a point to make as well. Let's say you say, I called it. I said Nip would win. But then you gave a reason, okay. You said, right, I think Makalele is just going to shit on Kenny S, if it was Nip versus Titan. Makalele shit on Kenny S, and I think that overall Nip will just dominate him on CT side, like 12-3 every half. But then the game happens, it's like 8-7. Nip's only winning 7 rounds on CT halves. Makalele gets his head caved in by Kenny S. But in the end, Nip manages to prevail in a really close game. You get almost no points for that, I'm afraid. Like, you said the name of the person that would win, the team that would win, but all your reasoning was wrong. Not only did you... The guy who didn't give any reason, that's worse, by the way. But to give reasons that's wrong, that's almost as bad. It's not quite as bad, but it's almost as bad. At least you gave some value a little bit, but it was worse. You still don't get much credit for that. In terms of... So you get no points for that. It's also a problem that when you say, like, I called it and I was right, if you then give no reasoning, people tend to draw this kind of false equivalence between, right, well, he said the name of the team that was right, so he's right, and then say I gave the team that would win, and I gave all this reasoning, he's right, and then another guy gave a load of reasoning, maybe even more in depth, and said who would win. Oh, they were just all right. So right's this big label, and they were just all right. Well, no, there's no equivalency there whatsoever. I gave all these reasons. He maybe went even more in depth. This guy just said a name. We have to apportion credit. It has to be appropriate to what happened. That guy gets the minimum possible, if any. These guys get a lot. They're providing value. They're doing interesting things. They tell you about themselves, how they see the world. It's just as bad. I'll give you another example that annoys me in life itself, is the people who say stuff like, you know, the people where they're like a friend of yours or an acquaintance, and something happens in the world, it's best when it has nothing to do with them. Like it's someone else's business, like a huge business that they've never even interacted with. Or something like someone has like an amazing scientific idea and they go, that was my idea, you know. You go, oh, really? Did you? Oh, did you actually like draw some blueprints out and then take a patent out? And then did you actually study like engineering to know how to make that? And then you figured out all the details and you looked into the scientific, the physics behind it. And then actually you kind of like understood this was where the industry was going. Oh, right, you just said, I think it'd be cool if a car had a feature where, like, it could just, like, park itself. If I just say that in, like, 1985, I don't get any fucking credit for someone in, like, 2010 making a car that, like, has sensors and stuff and has, like, a GPS navigation system with a satellite. Like, I don't get, you see what I mean? I don't get any fucking credit for that. I just said something that could happen with no real reason, and I'm not psychic, remember, to think it would happen, and it happened to happen later. I shouldn't have said happened to happen. That's bad writing. I'm using the same phrase. Whatever. It happened to occur within space-time continuum. That doesn't. You haven't fleshed the idea out at all. There's no reasons there. The reasons are what give it impact, give it significance, give it value. So I called it. Yeah, maybe you did, but you get no credit for a fucker.